Accounting.
And Vice Chairman on Committee on Management Accounting of ICI for giving me this opportunity to host the session. And I also thank you all for attending this virtual CP meeting. वो कहते हैं आसमान पर ठिकाने किसी के नहीं होते, आसमान पर ठिकाने किसी के नहीं होते, जो जमी के नहीं होते वो कहीं के नहीं होते, जो जमी के नहीं होते वो कहीं के नहीं होते. तो वी हैव विद अस CA Charanjot Singh Nanda, Central Council Member, Chairman Committee on Management Accounting of ICAI. He is Central Council Member for the term 2019-22. He is also Chairman of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI and Vice Chairman of CP Committee of ICAI. He is also member on the board of 26 committees of ICAI. Earlier, he was Vice Chairman of Corporate Social Responsibility Committee of ICAI, Vice Chairman of Banking, Financial Services and Insurance Committee, nominated on the IRDA Steering Committee of Implementation of Risk-Based Capital Regime. He was a member of Quality by the Government of India, also a member of the 2000.
उपकार सर आपका नेटवर्क थोड़ा वीक आ रहा है सर. उपकार सर आपका नेटवर्क वीक आ रहा है सर थोड़ा.
Okay. Just wait, sir, I change the network.
द मीन टाइम उपकार सिंह सर कनेक्ट साइड. अच्छा कनेक्ट कर गए सर.
Hello.
हाँ जी सर. नाउ इट इज फाइन. फाइन सर.
He was a member of Quality Review Board set up by the Government of India. He was member of Central Council for the term 2004 to 2016. And I think he is the senior most person in the Central Council. He was chairman of Committee on Internal Audit of ICAI and chairman of Committee of Members in Industry. And he was chairman of Women Empowerment Committee also, and was the vice chairman on the Public Finance and Government Accounting, and a long list of achievements. And एक चीज नंदा जी की इसमें रह गई है, वो है कि नंदा जी में
उपकार सर आपका फिर नेटवर्क इशू आ रहा है सर.
ओके. Now voice is clear, sir?
Yeah, now it's fine, sir.
Now I request Nanda ji to come forward for his address.
Thank you, Upkarji. Today is a very scintillating session on a very topic. I request all to please put your system on mute, then the voice echoing will stop. Upkarji, अपने system को mute पे करते हैं, please. So very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We have a very exciting topic today, which is credit risk management. I have with me CA Rajiv Singh, who is former director of Union Bank and presently director of RS Valuation Services Private Limited, a person who is totally attuned to doing non-traditional areas and inspiring chartered accountants to move in that direction. And the address by today's speaker, CA Bihari Lal Deoda, you'll find it to be par excellence. I have with me CA Upkar Singh, the chairman of Chandigarh branch, and CA Rahul Jindal, a young upcoming forensic auditor who wants to contribute to the cause of this profession. So ladies and gentlemen, let me put my PPT so that I'm able to discuss certain issues which are pertinent to this topic. But before this, I want to tell you that our profession, this great profession, shall achieve newer heights once we are strong. Time calls for strength of chartered accountants, and I am reminded of a couplet which says, कुछ इस कदर बदहवास हुए आंधियों से हम, कुछ इस कदर बदहवास हुए आंधियों से हम, जो पेड़ खोखले थे हम उन्हीं से लिपट गए. You go and seek strength from people who are weak. No, my dear friends, our institute, which was set up an act of parliament even before the constitution itself, gave us the strength to perform. I'll just give me a second, I'll put in my PPT. Is my PPT visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible, sir.
Great. So what is credit risk? Credit is the oldest form of risk that is faced by bankers across the globe. Yes, it is a very imminent risk of default on loans. Credit risk is the biggest risk the bank faces because of the nature of the business it inherits. If credit can be defined as nothing but the expectation of a sum of money with some limited time, then it will not be fulfilled, because credit risk is as old as ending. You have to see the risk perspective when you end, whether the money comes back, whether there are certain or more issues which may create problems. Credit risk management is the practice of mitigating losses by understanding the adequacy of bank's capital and loss reserves at a given moment of time. While the Indian economy, you are aware, which steeply recovered from the effects of first lockdown, the second wave of pandemic increased the risks in credit profile of borrowers, making credit risk management the need of the hour. So you have to understand, very importantly, that credit risk management is becoming increasingly important element as the Indian banks move to a regulatory framework by Basel II, which makes banks compulsory to implement credit risk management. The banks should also now have to create an awareness about the risk and how the risk has to be mitigated, along with the need to identify, measure, monitor, and control credit risks, as well as determine how adequate capital can be held against those risks, so that in case the risks are occurred, how those risks are compensated. To comply with the more stringent regulatory requirements and to absorb the higher capital cost for this credit risk, many banks are overhauling their approaches to credit risk. Yes, but if they view this as a strict compliance exercise, they are short-sighted. It is basically a call of business, a strategy call, which will help the banks to greatly improve overall performance and secure a competitive advantage. What are the credit risks? 5 credit risks. Number 1, during the repayment period, the money doesn't come back. The capital doesn't come back. Second, when you sell off a secured asset, I have something in mortgage, when I sell them, the appropriate amount is not coming back to me. So neither I do get back my principal nor the interest. The third is in case where series of repayments stop due to some unexpected reasons, in which even the Honorable Supreme Court had to intervene, what happened during the pandemic. Credit risk due to loss of funds while settling acquired securities. Yes, if there is a market risk of loss of funds. The fifth is risk while payment to offshore organizations when they are under sovereign jurisdiction. The sovereign jurisdiction has to be settled, and at that time there are risks. So to offset such risks, banks must use credit risk management tools and techniques. The tools are, you need to have a credit approving authority wherein all facets are looked into. You need to follow the prudential norms which are very clearly prescribed by the Reserve Bank of India. You need to do risk rating. You need to do risk pricing, and more importantly, you need to use the data analytics for risk detection and control, including artificial intelligence, to ensure that the person who is taking the exposure has a clean track record. And the sixth one, the last one, is loan review mechanism, which we more commonly called as LRM. The system and processes, I told you, I have discussed these. Moving ahead, we need to understand one very important. What are the challenges to successful risk management? Number 1, inefficient data management. In today's time, the wealth, the intellectual property right is data. So if you're not able to assess the right data and draw inference from it, in banking there is a term called as exception reporting. If you're not able to do that, you're on a wrong footing. No group-wise risk modeling framework. You have to have group-wise risk modeling framework so that you are able to effectively define and understand what calculated risk you want to take. Constant rework on all ongoing basis. The risk has to be reworked and monitored every day. Insufficient risk tools. When you speak of the times of technology, if you don't have risk tools, we are on a wrong footing. Cumbersome reporting. The reporting has to be very, very concise and precise. We can't afford to have the reporting which is too huge. Next, best practices in credit risk management. I am on the conclusion of my talk. The first risk in effective credit risk management is to gain a complete understanding of a bank's overall credit risk by looking risk at individual, customer and portfolio levels. Second, the banks need to understand their risk profiles, as much information is often scattered amongst business units. You can't visit the head office and determine what is happening at the units. Banks have no way of knowing if capital reserves accurately reflect risk, if loan loss reserves adequately cover potential short-term credit losses. So vulnerable banks are targets for close scrutiny by regulators and investors. I am reminded of a small incident where a person went up to a bank's branch which was on the 14th floor without a lift. So when he went there totally out of breath, the manager was very happy. He said, "Sir, I'm so happy I have come to my bank. Can you tell me the reason?" He said, "Yes, I have gone through the data and your bank is the bank with highest NPA. This shows that you don't take risk seriously. So if I'm not able to return the money, I'm at a better zone." So we need to understand that ultimately all of us have to work in creating value. So on the last slide of the day, the key to reducing loan losses and ensuring that capital reserves appropriately reflect the risk profile is to very robustly implement an integrated quantitative credit risk solution. Now, what does the solution do? It includes better model management. The entire model has to be viewed from a bird's eye and the risk inference be drawn. Real-time scoring and limit monitoring. If you see in stock markets, every moment the limit is being monitored. So this is required again when credit risk is there. Robust stress testing capabilities, early signs of frauds, early signs of running away are very important. And the last is data visualization capabilities and business intelligence tools, artificial intelligence, which will give important information into the hands of those who need it, who review it, and who are ultimately responsible for getting the recovery. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm done with my presentation. We have with us so many learned speakers. So I want to just end by saying that the institute is working as the highest level. Two things I would like to tell you, which we took on 1st July when our 72 glorious years ended. Number one, if any CS student loses any of his parent, single parent, he would not be need to pay the course fees, and this shall be for next 2 years also. And second very important decision, which was a gift by Ministry of Corporate Affairs to us, it was that now chartered accountants can set up multidisciplinary partnership firms. So now you can partner with an advocate, you can partner with an architect, you can partner with an engineer, you can partner with an ICW, a CS, any professional which has a regulatory body which regulates that profession, you can be a partner to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you one thing very candidly, that now chartered accountants are at such place where their capacity building is at the highest level. And when it comes at the highest level, then you can exhibit your strengths, your skills. So end by a couplet. The couplet says, "Jo khairat mein milti kamyabi to har shakhs kamyab hota." जो खैरात में मिलती कामयाबी तो हर शख्स कामयाब होता, फिर कदर ना होती किसी हुनर की और ना ही कोई राजीव जी जैसा लाजवाब होता. So the answer is very simple, very candid. If you have the work, you have the trades you perform, it cannot success you never get in charity. So we need to hone our technical skills to be able to effectively discharge our duty as a credit risk manager. So I want to thank you all, and I give the dice back to Mr. Jindal for further proceedings. Rahulji, the dice is all yours.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू फॉर योर ग्रेट प्रेजेंटेशन। मैं नंदा साहब के बारे में कहूंगा कि नंदा साहब ने ही इज द सीनियर मोस्ट काउंसिल मेंबर, and I guess more than half of his life he has spent towards working towards the institute as a council member. I guess since 1990-92 se sir has been working. So we are really pleased to have you as our council member, sir. Now over to Rajiv Singh sir. I guess जो भी valuation का काम करते हैं, corporate finance restructuring का काम करते हैं, I guess Rajiv Singh sir needs no introduction for that because मैंने अपना valuation का सबसे पहला session राजीव सर का ही attend करा था institute का जब सर ने लिया था. But still, as a brief introduction, so Rajiv sir is a recognized expert in the field of valuation, mergers, acquisition, corporate finance, restructuring. So for past 25 years, he has clients all over the world, being in India, China, Nepal, Mauritius, Dubai. So he has been working as an expert witness for various international forums as well. So he's a certified information system auditor, a qualified valuer, as well as a registered valuer with the IBBI. He has taken more than 800 seminars and he has imparted his knowledge to more than 8,000 students for various institutions such as ICAI, IIM, Ashokam, PhD Chambers of Commerce. He has been a joint technical director. He is on as a special invitee. He has been working closely with the institute. He was instrumental in developing the valuation standards for ICI as well as ICSI. Further, he was a member of task force for the banking and financial sector. So Rajiv sir has been imparting his knowledge for valuation restructuring. So I would request Rajiv sir for his comments on what is about the credit risk management about this seminar which is being conducted by the Committee on Management Accounting. Over to Rajiv sir. Sir, आप म्यूट पे हैं सर.
Okay, so is that fine? Am I audible?
Yeah,
Very
yes,
much,
sir.
sir. Very much, very much. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Rahul. I think you have introduced more than what I deserve. Thank you very much, Nandaji. You covered credit risk management. I have fasted ever heard on this topic, and I'll have to be faster than that to finish my topic because we have a learned speaker father. So I'd also thank you, Chandigarh branch, Sri Upkar Singh ji, for thinking about in collaboration with Nanda ji on the topic of this nature, which is, I am very sure, is important for today's context. And the Committee of Management Accounting, I know Nanda ji for last, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years. We worked with him, and he always works for development of profession, and this is how he's chosen the topic. So thank you very much for all other people who have joined, and Dr. Surendra Pal of the CME committee, C.A. Gyan, all people who are connected to today's program. I'll just give a roadmap because I'm just given a very limited time because I'll have to go for somewhere else. But this is a topic very close to my heart, and I worked for 3 years in a bank and done my best to change the systems and practices. And some of them will, of course, address today that how the situation evolved over a period, basically helped bank in a great way to withstand what exactly is doing today, because it was a very difficult exercise to manage even mergers with different credit risk practices. So let's understand 2-3 important aspects about the credit risk management. That's why it is important. It is important for both, for the bank as well as it is important for the corporate. So there is no doubt about that, because if the corporates are not managing their credit risk, then of course the banks also will have a consequences for that. But of course, I'll give a background more because generally we follow, because the corporate level, the credit risk management might not be working, though there are requirement as per the SEBI for at least listed companies to follow that. But that might not be working the way one would like to see in India. As compared to the bank, they are forced to do that because it's a very important exercise for their banking. And credit risk is one of the important risks out of the entire risk management system of the bank. So let's first understand that how banks works within a system and try to manage this credit risk. And within that, what are the key features we should understand, and what are the changes which has impacted the credit risk management process after the COVID, because the COVID-19 has literally disrupted the business models, the cash flow position, and of course the way you were carrying businesses. So, and the data which was sufficient enough before COVID might not be sufficient to take a call and decision, and we are still following archives, approaches, mechanism. So there is a lot of changes required. But before I start or discuss any conceptual part, I would urge all people through this Chandigarh branch as a flag bearer of ICI that if this is the topic, if you can master, can you believe how much salary you can command in the market? Because you understand there is something called chief risk officer. Now those guys can get even 3 crores, 5 crores salary. We advertised in our bank, I remember, and there was not even a 5 or 6 CVs coming up for a chief risk officer, because the people who came, they were all routine guys, moving from one department to another department and then spend their time in the banking system. And they were claiming to be the chief credit risk officer. The problem is that there is no systematic institutional support for a people to become a risk manager. So young chartered accountant, if you can think of about this, I'll give you this idea that apart from the chief risk officer, which commands a salary 10 times higher than what a CMD of a bank or MD of a bank can command, right? Because that's the market dynamics is, and there is hardly around 40-50 top grade risk managers available in this country. If you can focus at it, will be good through this program. That's what one important message I wanted to pass, because this is the need of the hour. And of course, it is something which, in my understanding as a chartered accountant, you will be in a much better position to fulfill this gap and help the economy, because this is if you are basically a protecting bank, we are protecting country India, because we are a bank driven economy. We are not a market driven economy. We still are a bank driven economy. So if the banks are healthier, the corporate will be healthier, and vice versa. That's the game goes on. So let's look at that, how the bank function within that. We have a board, within that we have a risk management committee. Now that is basically a specialized committee of a bank, and I had an opportunity to serve on those committees. So I'll give you some macros understanding that how it goes there inside, apart from what you know from outside. And then within this risk management committee, you have a credit risk management committee, a special committee. Now that committee basically looks into the credit risk related issues. And then you have a risk management department. Within this risk management department, you have a credit risk cells also. So now each one or each regional level will have a credit risk officer sitting there. So look at the need and the importance of those officers playing in the market for support of the bank. And I hardly find credible people sitting there. How credit risk management has gone changed? 3-4 important aspects we should understand. The first is that credit risk management is not a static management. You can't go with a credit risk policy approved by the board and then simply sit for a year and wait for auditor to pinpoint that these are some deviations and therefore you act. It is pretty dynamic. Every time it has to be managed and managed on a continuous basis. The second important point is that the credit risk management is a product of human behavior. Now, this is a very critical thing I'm telling you. Most of the cases, I'll give you some data to prove my point, and I have been doing, and give you one example to how I've addressed that, because it's not enough to just identify the problem, but it is important that we should also give a solution to this, and that's what the whole process is. So, in a credit risk management department, whatever the system bank fixes right from top to bottom, you will see most of the time in India's scenario, we are focused on quantitative data. That is what is a financial data, right? We generally have very few banks in India as of today have a capability to look at the non-financial data. So Rahul, you're a forensic guy, this is a very important aspect I'm telling you in today's world to capture this, understand the non-financial information. And for that to do that, you have to have AI powered credit risk management system. Otherwise, you will not know the behavior. How do you understand? You can understand the inability of a person to not to pay, but how do you assess the unwillingness to pay? That is also is a big credit issue. So that is the reason why the bankers are forced. You need to be a very techno guy, like you have to be an expert in. If you want to be a good quality forensic expert, you have to be expert in technology also. You need to know all those tools. So similarly in credit risk management, if it has to be AI powered, you will understand the behavioral pattern and you can forecast them. Not only focus on historical data, but also you can focus on what is the behavioral changes which are taking place. So take example of a COVID. Now today, the health, how we address health in the next 6 months is going to help us to understand how economy will do in the next 1 year. Are you getting my point? Never before in the history somebody would have thought like this. I was doing some programming. In fact, after this, I am going for a Qatar program, and you'll be surprised. There also, the government has diverted a lot of funds from their health system to address immediate concern of the COVID issue, which probably would have gone for a capitalization. So right now, to think about what is the level of vaccination, how it is the behavioral pattern, how the middle class is performing, and some of the data is really disturbing as of today in the credit risk management part. So to understand the issue of credit risk management, we have to, I'm not going to the nitty-gritty, I'm only going to give you the macro level picture, like what people make error in banking sector. And I was the first one to, in my board, to pinpoint this. To give you one classical example, the problem in this our country is we have a less reliance, the kind of data we produce. I'm counting that including our financial statements. Forgive me for saying so, that the reality, I'm talking from a real world. I'm not talking for a theoretical world. To understand what is your financial data, you have to back it. You have to also take in account the non-financial information. That is the one important aspects in the credit risk management. If it is factored, you will be able to address it in a much better way. And the banks are heavily investing in this area. So if you are a digital bank, you are capturing this and you have a behavioral pattern, you will be able to forecast the losses better. And days are gone when you are going for a credit risk scoring model, like you see in examination 90 marks to 30 marks. So like in Union Bank, we have a CR1 to CR10. So CR10 guy is a default. That means you are scoring 30 marks, like you see in exam. And the 90 plus marks is a CR1. The problem with credit risk management, I'll give you two classical examples. Hopefully, am I allowed for 5 more minutes so that...
Sure, sir.
Okay, fine.
No,
So
sure,
I
sir.
will give some live example where people will be interested in knowing. When I went into the bank, there were a lot of funding going into NBFC. I picked up the one signal that the price to book ratio of NBFC at that time was a 5 to 6 to 7. Unbelievable, because what is the asset in the balance sheet of the NBFC is the loan only. So I realized that there is something wrong going on. So let me check what is happening. So I checked the practices, which I can't tell you out publicly here. And I sounded my risk management committee team that please, what is your process? How do you do investments in a NBFC? So they said, sir, our policy is very clear. Nandaji, this is a very interesting observation I'm giving. So they said, sir, our credit risk policy is very clear. We are investing in a top rated company, NBFC. So A rated NBFC I'm investing, right? Or AAA rated investing or AA rated companies only were investing. I said, after that, what you are doing? Are you looking into the financial statement also? She said, no, for say AAA rated, externally credit rated company, we don't look at the financial statement. I said, there, what is the problem? And you are not.
राजीव सर आपका सिग्नल वीक है सर. राजीव सर आपका सिग्नल इज वीक.
Okay. if I take my video off, will that be fine? Is that sound fine?
Yeah, sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, sure, sure, sir.
Yeah. So please appreciate this example. So you are giving loan to NBFC, which is a top rated. So what you'll do then, at the stage of pricing, you will be pricing for a top rated company, whereas this company carries a huge amount of risk. If you would have read the financial statement and you would have understood that what is happening within that, then you will not be only guided by the top rating of a credit rating agency, who majorly relies on the financial statement, audited financial statement, and they do not do a more deep study of the financial statement. So your pricing is lower, and therefore you are carrying a huge amount of risk in terms of that the losses will mount. And I'm not going to take the name of the NBFC which I'm referring. You will come to know about that. So later on, it has proven correct, because I've shown them how box company, you have heard about the sale company. I created a structure and shown them that this is what the box companies were created to siphon the money out of this organization. So this is the skill set. The third skill set I'm saying in credit risk management is the bank managers and the people are not able to interpret, understand the index properly, and they are not in a position to gauge the risk because they are still guided by the old Indian accounting standards, and they are not very clear. So you need to develop the skill set to gauge those aspects separately. Then the one important aspect, I'll give another live example which will help you. Any students of recent years will be aware about the portfolio management concepts. See, what happens is that in banking, if you are only focusing on, say, micro level, and if you are not focusing on macro level credit risk management. So what is the difference between this? To give an example, if I'm looking for a housing loan customer, this guy is a micro level, single individual customer. And if I accumulate all together, so therefore it becomes a macro level. There is in fact, for last 2-3 years, we can see, and this is Rahul, very interesting. Same consultant, I'll not take the name. That guy is advising almost every public sector bank and charging crores of rupees. And do you know what his advice was? That you should expand, that means grow in RAM sector. Now, what is this RAM sector? That is a real retail, then agriculture and MSME segment. I said that if everybody start growing into this sector, right, so what will be where you are going to grow? Ultimately, individual level risk might be lower, but at the portfolio level risk could be higher, because if you understand the behavioral pattern, all these guys, like in COVID, you can see, generally you can think that if I have a large pool of borrower, then one can go for a default, others will not, but doesn't happen in real life. A classical example is a Citibank example. Not today. They wind up their operation of a retail long back. So every bank started pushing. So now let's see a growth versus credit risk, a trade-off. You must have heard about the story of the third example. So what I advise them, that while reducing your credit risk, right, individual level, you are magnifying the risk at the portfolio level. And that exactly has happened to a metro bank in US. A classification error, can you believe? 7 billion, and it has went up to 8 billion pound because of the wrong classification, because the classification has the implication on risk weighted asset, and that requires a capital adequacy. So one fine morning they came and said, my God, we do not have adequate capital. For instance, if I am lending to a government organization, if I am lending to housing borrower, if I am lending to a corporate, each one requires a different level of capital adequacy. Are you getting my point? So the risk weighted asset is a very important criteria, and the bank manages this. And in the process, if they make an error in classification, your credit risk will magnify. So I'm saying a management of credit risk would consider the macro and the micro, and both on simultaneous basis. The last point before I conclude, because you have I think I've already exceeded my time. I'm sorry, but this is an important one I would like to say. We are looking today a COVID resilient organization. And that requires a huge understanding about what was the business model before, what is the business model now, how the competition is unfolding, who is going to survive and who is not. Like at one point in time, HDFC Bank was considered to be a something which nobody can touch it. But look at that, the one error they did in terms of the credit. Still today, you cannot get a credit card from the HDFC Bank. They have not been able to fix, but nobody is addressing. Market is not even considering in pricing. See, all these issues are very important for a credit risk manager in today's world to understand that first, the behavioral part. If you are moving into the retail segment, the behavioral part is critical. If you are moving into a top segment, the large borrower, you should focus more on the financial numbers because there you will feel more reliable data set coming up. And the last one, which is very, I think, close to my heart is your MSME segment. And one last example, I'll give you how I found the problem and try to address it. I saw a data in your I don't know how many of us, Nandaji, knows about this fact that this Mudra loan was designed and thought by a chartered accountant. And that chartered accountant, I'm not going to take his name, he sits in Mumbai. It was his idea and it was a wonderful idea, but how it is misapplied. This is the biggest trouble in this country. We have the policy, but if you go to the branch level, if you have a huge amount of deviation taking place, and it is quite frequent, it is very frequent, rather than it should be infrequent, we have no credit risk management, believe me. So within that, the Mudra, I give you one example because you have a Shishu, you have a Kishore, you have a Tarun. So what was happening in, I picked up the data from a public sector and we picked up the data from your the private sector. In a private sector, in a Mudra, you'll be surprised the NPA level is just 2-3%. Right? In a public sector, it is 15%. So I wanted to know what is the reason, why it is happening. So it was all related to, customer acquisition. Because what was happening, the guys were sitting and they were collecting customers in bulk and giving back to the bank and charging some commission. And then there was a lot of people who are not eligible were giving loan. So I realized, how do I address this? So I address at the first level that somehow we'll have to cut out because the public sector bankers are not meant to handle the 50,000 loan, which is a Mudra loan, and they are not comfortable discussing. So how do we do that? Introduce the fintech. So we've introduced Union Bank of India is the first bank in the country which has started. I don't know right now what is happening, but in 2021 I started with the first few centers with a 10 minutes process of loan approval as well as the disbursement. So in a Mudra loan, can you believe 8 to 9 month time was a normal turnaround time from appraisal to disbursement, and every stage there will be some pilfers of money. So what we did is that entire process is cut out by using the technology, and so that the right people can come and then hurdles can be taken out. So these are the some way to introduce the technology to reduce the turnaround time, and then of course the captures the risk in a much better way, because then you have a better way to address. And so in credit risk management, every segment of loan, because suppose some bank is giving loan on gold side, so they are doing very well, their NPA level is less. In education, the NPA level is less, but in public sector, even in education loan, the NPA level is very high. In a gold loan also, the NPA level is high. Because why? Because they are not trained. They have not understood the market. That is also a very important aspect. You should not venture into the area where you are not comfortable or you do not understand the economics. You will not be in a position to know, what could be the credit risk can arise. So this is what overall summary I wanted to discuss at this stage, giving a roadmap with a new technology which is coming up, like you can use an option model to understand the default. These things are futuristic. Of course, being used by a lot of banks, and if you are a more digital bank, you can address this, and your credit risk management will be comprehensively different as compared to a pretty traditional. I doubt with a traditional skill set, you'll be able to address with the speed and arrest the situation, because in credit risk management, to sum up, the speed is the king. If you can identify at the right point of time, you can safeguard the bank asset. Because the latest data of NCLT, if you see it, 39% up to March 2021 is now recovery has fallen. Last year, March 2020, it was 45%. Before that, it was even 60-70%. And if I kick out the initial year, you will be surprised how the realization is just 30%. Can you believe that? And therefore, a bad bank is the future. So no bank will be interested in sending good client to NCLT. That's my assessment. Thank you very much, all of you, for giving me a time and a presence hearing. I thought I will not discuss more the model and the techniques. These are there for Mr. Devara to cover. My job is to just give an overall perspective, the opportunity, and how we can address those problems, identify. And if we can do that as a chartered accountant, I'm very sure we can provide services to the banking sector and in that process, of course, to the economy in a great way. And that's how I personally believe there's no way you can go and fight with the government or the people who are criticizing. The best way to fight them is to do a good quality job. Let them recognize you that yes, you are the one who can do that, and they will fall back to you. So that's how you get a respect. That's how you perform. Thank you very much, all of you who are hooked today for this wonderful program. This was my pleasure. And once again, thank you to Chandigarh branch for this topic. I hope you will take a series of webinar on this topic. Hopefully, it will be a great help for chartered accountants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajesh
Thank
sir.
you.
I'll take a minute to summarize. Yeah.
For a very scintillating and mind-boggling presentation, over to Rahulji for his further indulgence.
Yes, sir. Just to summarize in, sir, as you very correctly said, speed is the key. Speed इसलिए जरूरी है. So you should be faster than the fraudster who are undertaking such fraud so as to risk the credit risk management. And for that, artificial intelligence is the only solution possible for the banks and various financial institutions, considering the nature and complexities of entries being passed. So artificial intelligence, काफी banks जैसे PNB बैंक है और banks है, they are moving towards AI techniques whereby they are now creating a credit risk of the borrowers, like very risky, low risk, high risk. So they are trying to create that portfolio through the artificial intelligence. So as you correctly said, artificial intelligence speed is the key, and hopefully banks, we will be able to see banks in future using that technique so that the frauds are reduced to the minimal level, sir.
For South Korea, Rahul, just a point to remind you, in South Korea, in banking system, you will get mortgage loan in 3 minutes. Valuation, loan processing, everything happens in 3 minutes because all data is extracted in a real-time basis. In India, I find the biggest fraud happens in valuation. Sometimes you even don't know whether the property exists or not, and these are of serious amount of. These are basically a collateral to reduce the credit risk. In fact, this compounds the credit risk. So this is the trouble. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Some major issues is regarding the valuation and the financial statements. So as correctly said. So thanks, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your insights into credit risk management. Now we are over to our next eminent speaker, CA Bihari Lal Deora ji. I'll just give a brief introduction of sir. So Bihari Lal Deora ji is a FCA, CMA, CIPM. He's an accomplished financial professional. He began his career as a financial analyst with Credit Suisse and Fidelity Investment. So he has been into investment and credit risk management for a long time. So he has been associated with various university institutions as well. So currently he is working with Abacus. He's managing the corporate and investment part in there. So he is a regular visiting faculty as well for various financial programs, and currently is pursuing PhD from Symbiosis University. So over to Deora sir for his insights into credit risk management. Sir, over to you, sir, for your valuable insights, sir.
Thank you, Rahul ji. First of all, let me thank CA Upkar Singh ji, Chairman Chandigarh branch, for inviting me for this session. Special thanks to Nanda sir for his bird eye view on credit risk management, and Rajiv ji for a perspective on fintech and valuation, and Rahul obviously for putting all these things together. And special thanks to Surendra Pal ji and Gyan sir for making us connect with thousands of chartered accountants across India and the world for this virtual session. So 90% of my work or what I wanted to say is already done because Nanda sir and Rajiv sir have already said what I wanted to say. So, let me get into sort of the nitty gritties of what they meant and what it means for a day-to-day practicing chartered accountant. I'll try and share my screen and let me know if you all can see it and then we can go from there. Can you all see my screen now?
No, yes, sir, it's visible.
Yes, sir, very much. Very much.
Okay, wonderful. So, like Rahul said, my name is Biharilal Devra. I began my CA journey way back in 2003. I was fortunate enough to obviously get a All India rank at that point in time, but very unlucky to not get a campus placement. That was a credit risk moment for me. But eventually, I figured out my way. I started with the CA firm, and eventually got into credit, analysis. In my current job, I work with Abacus Asset Manager LLP. It's a boutique asset manager, based out of Mumbai. And we typically manage money for high net worth individual under PMS and AIF format. And my job is to obviously, apart from obviously investments, I look at risk and compliance and other factors. So without further ado, let me sort of begin the session and take you forward. So what are we trying to sort of, cover in this session today? So you obviously have got a bird eye view or a 30,000 feet view on what credit risk is and where the problem is and where things are happening, right? We will sort of start with a little bit more basic in terms of where the fundamental problem is and what at all credit risk or credit rating means and what is the standard model on, the 4C model, which everybody talks about. And if time permits, we will also cover a few strategy sort of basics from a portfolio management perspective and figure out where things are. At any point in time, feel free to ask questions. I mean, you have a chat section, so feel free to post the question. We will have some time towards the end for Q&A session, and we'll try and cover those questions towards the end. So a little bit of history on, what we have to understand why credit risk management is so poor in India. So in US, the first rating agency, which is Moody's, that started back in 1909, right? Almost 112 years ago. John Moody's, he started assigning grades to railroad companies. So the railway companies there are multiple railway companies and all of them are privatized. And he started assigning some rating to those companies for the purpose of getting loan. In 1916, Standard & Poor, two gentlemen came together and they started sort of the S&P. And 1924 is when the Fitch, which is the third largest sort of rating agency, started. And 1930 is when the federal regulator, which is the equivalent of RBI or the central bank there, they started using the grades to evaluate banks, right? So if you see the rating history or the rating culture or the credit risk culture in US is almost 100-year-old. Fast forward, we come back to India. The first rating agency, which is CRISIL, as all of you know, which is affiliated with Standard & Poor's, started in 1987, right? ICRA, which is the second agency, which is affiliated to Moody's, started in 1991. Fitch India started a little bit, I think, 95. CARE is about 93. And then there are a few other rating agencies, which are new age rating agencies like Brickworks, Mira, Onikra, and I think there is one more which have recently got a license. So the credit culture is kind of less than 40 years old in India. And that is why it's taking a little bit more time to ingrain within the system or within our sort of people who analyze or disburse loans, right? So one part is the historical part in terms of how long you've been looking at it. Now, this is like a common question which I ask everyone, saying, when do you need credit rating, right? Is it only when you need a loan? Is it only when you have to prove your credit worthiness to someone? Is it when you are looking for new business? Is it when you are looking for new vendors? What is the fundamental need of credit rating, right? So the common sort of answer, which obviously I get, is whenever you need to raise capital, then you need credit rating. But these days, credit rating is sort of looked at even beyond just the loan perspective. So if you are a bank or if you are a, private banking or a wealth manager and you're looking to hire people who are client facing, you would like to check their credit rating, whether they have sufficient sort of credit history or not, and whether he will run away with client's money or not, right? So background verifications, you use credit rating. Like Rajiv ji said, in fintech, apart from giving loans, you want to check whether your vendors are good, whether your suppliers are good. When you are acquiring a company, from an M&A perspective, you look at credit rating. So no matter where you go, credit rating always has some sort of perspective within which you start, right? And as you see the new age fintech apps like Paytm and a lot of these other players, they in fact make quick decisions about you and about your longevity based on credit rating. So the cartoon here says, okay, you want to buy a lemonade and we need a credit rating. And he said, I'm only a 7-year-old and don't have a credit rating rate, right? So whether you are buying something, whether you are selling something, whether you are acquiring something, whether you are raising money to acquire something or raising money to sell something, you would need a credit rating from that perspective. Now, one thing which Rajiv ji spoke about extensively, and Nanda ji also alluded to, is where do we use rating? Now, is rating used for an input to decision making, or is rating a recommendation? When you see a rating from a Moody's or a S&P or a CARE or a CRISIL, does it mean that it is a recommendation saying that the company will default, or do you think it is just an input, one of the inputs for your decision making? And as we go forward, I'll explain or I'll take this sort of question. But this is like a food for thought for all of you by the time we go through the presentation. Now, one more question which I think came up was whether rating is an art or a science. Now, a science is something which is a defined model, right? So you put in some numbers, there is a standard formula, and based on which you get some answer. Right? Is rating a science, which means there is a model behind it, and once you enter data into the model, then it becomes whatever rating you have. Or whether it is a art, there is some sort of subjectivity involved in it, right? If it is a science, then largely it should predict what it is supposed to predict. If it's art, then there is a option to do sort of biases or look at behavioral biases, and from that perspective, right? So is the computer has the last word? When the computer says no, is that the last word which we are talking about, right? Mudra loan is one of those examples where computer is definitely not the last word, because even though you don't have a credit history, you can still avail Mudra loan from that perspective. The micro, lending, is essentially also the similar example. But we'll go in more details in terms of whether rating is an art or a science. Now, no matter which textbook you go to, and I have two books written from Taxman. You can Google them out on credit risk management. No matter whatever you Google, fundamentally it's a 4C credit model, right? Now in Google you will find a 5C model, 6C model, 7C model, but fundamentally there are 4 major pillars on which any credit analysis, credit risk, or credit rating will depend upon, right? The first and foremost of that is character. Now, Rahul, if me and you met in a general setting apart from this seminar, and you told me that you are a CA, immediately I have a connect, immediately I have a respect, immediately I have a background, immediately I have an expectation on how you will behave, right? If you meet someone else and he says I am a doctor, immediately obviously you will think that, okay, the guy is qualified, he would be soft-spoken, he is to be treated with respect, and he's something who can come to your rescue or save your life whenever needed, right? So what are we trying to assess? We are trying to assess character, right? Now it's a different matter when you tell them that whether he's a medical doctor or a homeopathy doctor or a regular doctor or a veterinary doctor. But technically speaking, how are you trying to assess character, right? So character refers to something which is known as ethical reputation. So if I ask you, all right, which chief minister has more popularity, or whether Tata is more ethical or Reliance is more ethical, whether Birla is more ethical or SR is more ethical, right? You have a reputation which precedes, right? And that reputation is what basically determining the character, right? Either it could be reputation. So for example, why do these celebrities endorse products? And when celebrities endorse product, why do people trust those products? People trust those products because the reputation of the celebrity endorses the product itself. And people say, if Amitabh Bachchan is saying that something is right, then obviously it has to be right. And they believe him rather than what the actual product is. And that is why the celebrity endorsement works, right? Similar to that, business qualification also works. So if you say I'm a MBA from Harvard, or I'm an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, or I'm CA or CFA or any of those qualifications, then people start sort of treating you in a different way. Versus when you tell you that I'm a 10th pass or a 12th pass or whatever you call it, right? And the third most important aspect to understand character is operating track record, right? Someone who has worked in companies, someone who had built businesses, someone who has sort of, spent his life, serving for people. Take an example of, Anna Hazare, right? Now, people started believing his whole, the cause of corruption-free India because he had a background, because he had a track record of, doing things for the people. Right? So if you have a track record, people will believe saying that, look, if he has done this once, he can do it again. And that is why you get people who are repeat, people who get repeat chances in terms of good performance. right? Now we are looking at ethical reputation, we are looking at business qualification, we are looking at operating track record. But for whom, right? So for example, if you were to sort of analyze whether Kingfisher has a credit risk or not, you can't simply call up the call center of Kingfisher and identify a beautiful voice on the other side and say that look, the company has sufficient credit rating or it doesn't have a credit risk, right? We are talking about these aspects of people who manage the business, like the directors, the managers, the executives, the chairman, the board, for who is responsible for borrowing and repaying the fund, right? People who are in senior management position, because like you said, company has a corporate wheel, and the directors are separate from this thing. It's a separate entity, and it is different from its shareholder, and hence you want to look at these qualifications or these characteristics in people who are managing the affairs of the country, right? So the reputation of your leader will precede the company itself, right? Now, what is the character trying to address, right? A character is trying to address the borrower's willingness to pay. And Rajiv ji also mentioned that it is very difficult to assess the willingness, right? You have joined your CA program, right? You are committed to, complete it on whatever promise. But are you willing to study? Are you willing to put that many hours, right? We don't know, right? You have paid the fees. That only shows part of your willingness. But are you willing to do what it takes to become a CA? Probably no. Probably yes. I don't know, right? So that is what we are talking about in terms of Bolland's willingness. Now, willingness has nothing to do with ability, right? You might see a person, who doesn't have a history right now, who doesn't have cash flow right now, but he is true to his word, right? In good olden days, we said Zaban ki value, right? So what is the willingness of the person to pay? And if you can trust his willingness, and willingness come from where, right? You will say, if a CA promises you, or if a doctor promises you that he'll repay his fund versus someone who is illiterate, he promises you that he'll pay funds, you're likely to believe someone who is more qualified than someone else. Why? Because you think he has a capacity to earn, right? He can earn through something. And that is why character is important, right? So for many lenders, the borrower's character is the most important variable in terms of analyzing, credit risk. Now, within the 4C, you can assign different weightages. You can have higher weightages to one. You can have lower weightages to one. And that is the reason why each rating agency considers different things, right? Now, I've taken this, from Moody's. And once the session is over, you will all get the copy of the presentation as well as the notes. But Moody's considers the following factors when assessing management quality, right? Which is assessing the character. So one is, what is the strategic direction of the business? Now, if you look at, the annual report of early 2000s of Tata Group, it will say that we want to expand to multiple geographies. We want to sort of go beyond India so that even if one economy is not doing well, other economies would be doing well. And hence you are sort of hedged from that perspective. You see 10 years later, Tata went out and acquired Jaguar. They went out and acquired Chorus. They went out and set up their operations in South Africa and so on and so forth, other countries. Right? Some of those experiments worked, some of those experiments failed. But at the end of the day, did the company had a strategic direction? And were they working towards it? That will show the character of the company. If you look at Reliance annual report, maybe early 2000, it will say that, we want to sort of diversify from oil and gas. We want to get into financial services. We want to get into telecom. We want to get into retail. And fast forward 10 years, you see, Reliance is into capital markets. Reliance is into lending. They are into insurance. They are into, Jio, which is obviously the most successful venture. So does the company have a defined strategic direction? And are they following that strategic direction? A lot of companies basically come and tell you, we want to be carbon free, we want to be debt free, we want to be, EBITDA positive, we want to be top 10, we want to be Fortune 500. What are they trying to tell you? They are trying to tell you the strategic direction of the business where the company is trying to go, right? And if they are taking sufficient efforts towards it, then you would think that the company has a character, right? Second is financial philosophy. Do they try to borrow and invest? Do they try to do it from internal accruals? Do they try to sort of, take it from capital market? Are they conservative? Are they not conservative? Those kind of accounting decisions in terms of policies will sort of define what the character is. Now, there are some companies which will pay hefty dividend despite having loans. There are some companies which will save dividends in the time of COVID, etc., right? Third is track record, which we already spoke about. Now, track record is something which obviously you have performed in the past, right? So if one of your business ventures performed in the past and the second venture also has the same track record or has the same promoter, then you would end up believing those guys. The next one is succession planning. Now, if you are an individual CA practicing and you don't go to office for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, nobody is going to do your work, right? Your people, your assistants can basically take the work to a certain level, but beyond that, they can't take it. And that is where they need you, right? Because everything is dependent on you. But if Ratan Tata doesn't go to office for like a month or he's on holidays for 3 months, TCS will not stop earning. Tata Steel will not stop earning. Why? Because he has succession planning in place. He has people who are working. He has a professional staff. He has a professional management, professional CEO, and his involvement in the day-to-day system is not required, right? So if you have succession planning, if you have track record, if you are conservative, if you have strategic direction, and if you are working towards that, on top of that, you have some reputation, some business qualification, some operating record, then largely you check the box for the character. Now, can I give a score to a character? No, I can't give a score to a character. All of you would have got that character certificate from school, which says that your character in the school was good or fair or ugly. Does that define anything? No, it doesn't define anything, right? There are a host of terrorists, who are PhD from Harvard or MITs or stuff like that, but they decide to join, something else, right? So character is something which is kind of, it's like a gray area. It's not black, it's not white. There is a dotted line which defines what your character is, right? So this is the first C of credit analysis, and the most important and the most difficult to measure when it comes to modeling, when it comes to analysis, and when it comes to giving a score from that perspective. And 90% of the time, people go wrong in this. If you are wrong in this, you are definitely dead. If you're wrong in others, you have some chances of recovery. But this one, completely dead. Now, what you have looked at is character, which is the willingness to pay, right? The second C of credit analysis or credit risk management is capacity. Capacity is your ability to pay, right? And how do you define your ability to pay? From your cash flows, right? So what are we trying to say? That this aspect addresses the cash flow or the ability of the issuer. Issuer means someone who has issued the bond or the loan to repay its financial obligation, right? Without sufficient capacity, it's very unlikely that he will be able to borrow money unless he has a net worth or otherwise, or he has a high collateral or liquidity or something, right? Now, if you have willingness, but you don't have a capacity, right? It's very difficult to raise money, but you can still raise money. Right? What is happening in startup world, when you go these days, you will see a lot of these startups able to raise money from a lot of investors without having any capacity to pay, right? All of them raise equity because in a classic debt mindset, their model will not work because all they have is an idea. They don't have cash flows, right? So it's very difficult for a startup to sort of raise money because they can't showcase ability to pay. They can showcase willingness to pay, not ability. And that is why equity investors will invest in it, not debt investors, right? But, if you look at, the startup investing from a 4C angle, essentially what you're looking at is character, but not capacity, right? Now, capacity is basically cash sufficientness, right? So, for example, if you take an example of Infosys or maybe Microsoft or any of these IT companies, they typically maintain 2 years or 3 years of cash balance of operating expenses as cash balance of their balance sheet. Why? So that in case a situation like COVID comes or something else comes and markets are not performing, then they have sufficient reserves to pay for 2 years expenses without hitting their P&L or otherwise. And that is what basically defines the capacity. So if you have very high cash balance, if you have very liquid cash balance, if you have very high net worth, then obviously capacity is high. Otherwise, the capacity is low. Now, capacity is something which can be measured, right? If you go for a home loan or if you go for a any other loan, typically they ask you what is your take-home salary, right? Why do they ask you? Because they want to address your capacity. Now, capacity could be amplified or de-amplified based on certain parameters, right? So your capacity is X, but I might give it 2X percentage or half X percentage depending on certain factors. What are those factors? Let me share it with you. Again, I have taken it from Moody's because they have more sort of reliable data as of now. So one is industry trend. Now, take an example of paper industry, right? Now, if it's a paper industry, what do you think is the future of paper industry? Do you think it is doing well? Do you think it is not doing well? At least in last 1.5, 2 years, you would have seen within COVID world, how many papers you would have printed, how many magazines you would have read, how many newspapers you would have read, right? How many people have actually written notes, even if the schools were working for like almost a year. Did people move to online reading? Did people move to online content or reading newspapers or everything on online, their mobile or tablet or computers rather than reading physically, right? So even if you are generating good cash flows right now, but if the industry in which you are in is in a downward trend, your capacity will be lower. And paper is one classic example of that, right? The same example you can take it for Moser Bayer, which was manufacturing floppies, or you can take it for Kodak camera or anything of that sort, right? Even if the company is doing good, if the trend in which or the industry in which it is there is going through an economic cycle, then it is not going to sort of come to sort of up to the mark on the credit perspective. The second is a regulatory environment. Now, if you are in Chandigarh, how many sort of options do you have to sort of change your power company, right? At least in Bombay, you have only two options. Either you can go to Reliance or Adani, which is one and the same now, or either you can go to a Tata Power from that perspective. Now, beyond that, you don't have a third option unless you have your own solar panel, your own, windmill or something. But beyond that, you don't have any option to go, right? If you have to travel from X place to Y place, you have only train available, or in flights, you have few flights available, right? So if you have a regulatory environment where the company which you're looking at has a regulatory license, which acts as a barrier to entry for other people, your capacity, even if it is low, it will be considered high because you have a long sustainable business model. Even if your capacity is low right now, you don't have an option but to continue. Customers don't have an option but to continue with the same, even if your customer servicing is low or vice versa or otherwise. Classic example is telephone or any of these utility kind of businesses which has regulatory licenses, right? Now, obviously, you can move from a monopoly, let's say monopoly of BSNL earlier to oligopoly where you have a Vodafone, Airtel, or a Jio right now. But eventually it remains a regulatory sort of protection which one person gets, right? The third aspect is essentially basic operating and competitive position. If you buy any of the smartphones which are Android based, whether it is MI or so many other companies you have, all of them give you the same features which Apple or someone will give you, but at a much lower cost, right? So what they're saying is that the market price of your product is same, but you are able to manufacture it at a lower cost. And if you are able to manufacture it at a lower cost, your margins are high and hence your capacity is high, right? Take a reverse example, Apple, right? Apple products are always priced very, very high, right? So even if, you're getting the same features in other phones, people are willing to pay a premium for your phone to get that brand symbol, right? So even if your cost is same across the industry, you are in a position to charge a little bit higher price than the rest of your competitors, and hence your capacity is high because your profitability is high. So either you are a cost leader, that means you can manufacture it at the lowest cost, or either you are a price leader that you can sort of charge high prices, and in both these scenarios, your capacity will be amplified, right? Because you have an advantage versus the market, right? Similar example could be when you buy a Bisleri, right? Now, Bisleri is a brand, not a product. But even if you're buying Aquafina or some other brand, you will still say that it is, Bisleri from that perspective. So that gives you some idea. The next one is financial position and sources of liquidity. Like I mentioned, about Microsoft, or Infosys, they keep 2 to 3 years of reserves or expenses in liquidity. And that gives you some help with respect to capacity, that even if the financials are not doing well, you have sufficient cash balance on the balance sheet, and hence your financial position or capacity becomes high. The last second aspect is obviously company structure / parent company support agreements. Now, take an example, Tata Swachh. Now, Tata Swachh is a new brand, hypothetically, which is launching maybe water purifiers, right? Now, Tata Swachh might not be doing well. Tata Swachh might not have good profitability right now, but the parentage is Tata. And you know that if anything goes wrong, they can pump in more money, they have enough liquidity, and they are sort of sufficiently high capacity sort of company. So can they give more money if the company sort of goes for a loss? Yes. And that basically will amplify the capacity of this company. Now, this happens in a typically, guarantee kind of scenario. A lot of times you will see that partners give guarantee for a loan, or the holding company gives a guarantee for the loan, or parents give guarantee for a student loan. Why? Because they can come to rescue if that person defaults in some to that extent, and hence your capacity is high. And the last is special event risk. Now, take an example. You have this Reliance refinery in Jamnagar, on which maybe debt is there, maybe hypothetically of maybe 500-600 crores, and it is right at the seashore. And if there is a earthquake or a tsunami or any unfortunate event, the refinery would be underwater. The refinery obviously pledged with the bank, but if that that is no longer there, what bank is going to recover, right? Now, if that is a special sort of, that's an event risk, right? Now, if you have an insurance for that kind of event, that in case this thing goes wrong, you can get an insurance claim, and that will act as a mitigant to that particular risk and will enhance your capacity because you have that insurance in place for whatever casualty is about to happen. COVID is one such event, which was an event risk, but nobody thought about it, and hence nobody had enough cover, either in terms of medical, either in terms of any other thing at the same level. So your capacity is your ability to pay. Your ability to pay could be X right now. It could be treated as 2x, or it could be treated as 0.25x based on these criteria: industry trend, regulatory environment, basic operating competitive position, sources of liquidity, your parental support, and special event risk, right? So we have covered character, which is your ability to pay. We have covered capacity, which is your willingness to pay. Now, there are two more aspects which come in the 4C model, and let's try and have a look at that. Now, the third most important sort of aspect, which everybody mentioned, is collateral, right? Now, what is collateral? Collateral is a high quality sort of cushion, or is additional liquid security available in case your borrower's defaults, right? It's a mortgage, it's a pledge. In old days, they call it girvi rakhna. So if you pledge your property, then in case you don't pay, the lender can sell that property and recover its money. And hence, you have ratios like loan to value, etc., etc. Now, take an example. I mean, Government of India recently, I think not recently, maybe a couple of years ago, they bought, few antique items from London Museum, which belonged to Mahatma Gandhi, right? It was his, eye shades, which is specs. It was some letters written by him, and they bought it for like maybe $10,000, right? Now, Government of India has bought it for $10,000. The valuation of that particular item, right, from a public valuer like Rajiv ji, is $20,000, right? And the actual value, in my understanding, is maybe $50,000. So, in Indian example, let's put it this way: Government of India has bought it for 10 lakh rupees. The valuation as per a registered valuer is about 20 lakhs. And the actual value, according to me, is 1 crore. Now, if I go with that item to bank, say that please take this as a collateral and give me a loan, at what amount do you think bank will give me a loan? Will it give me a percentage of 10 lakh at which the Government of India bought it? Will it give me a percentage of 20 lakh, which is the valuation report? Or will it give me a percentage of 100 lakh or 1 crore, which what the actual value of that is? Or the fourth option is it doesn't want to give a loan against such items, right? So the option number 1 is 20 lakh or less, 10 lakh or less. Option number 2 is 20 lakh or less. Option number 3 is 1 crore or less, and option number 4 is no loan, right? Now the answer could be varied as all of you try to sort of give your perspective. But tell me one thing: does that collateral have a readily available market value? Can you quickly liquidate that collateral, right? Take another example. There is a painting of maybe Mona Lisa, right? It was done by so-and-so analyst, and it is there in London Museum, and etc., etc. Does it have a value? Yes, it has a value. Can it be liquidated? Yes, it can be liquidated. Can it be liquidated immediately? Probably no, right? Someone will buy it. At what price? We don't know, right? And when he will buy, we don't know. versus that if I were to give you the same example for a property, that you bought the property at 10 lakh, the property is valued 20 lakhs, actual value is 1 crore. Will you be more comfortable in giving a loan against that property? Yes, because that asset is a hard asset, right? Compared to that, if I give an example, look, I have real gold or jewelry, which I want to give you as collateral, right? I bought it at 10 lakh. The market value based on valuation is 20 lakh, and the actual value, because it's antique nature, is like 1 crore, right? You'll be far more comfortable in giving a loan against a gold than against a property, than against the antique value, right? So what are we trying to assess in these three examples? We are trying to assess the quality of the collateral, and quality of the collateral depends on the liquidity which it provides. Any item which has a high obsolescence risk, such as fashion, technology, art, antique, right, are poor collaterals for loan, right? Take a different example. SBI, or SBI is the wrong example. Surf Excel, right? Now, Surf Excel is a brand which all of you know, right? Or Bisleri is a brand which all of you know. Now, Surf Excel sells its products at 110 rupees a kg. If you were to go to market and buy Surf Excel, which is a detergent washing powder, it's 110 rupees a kg. You buy some other brand, maybe a Ariel or XYZ brand, it is 70 rupees a kg, right? So the brand, assuming that the quality of both of them is same and both of them are blue in color and both of them have foam and etc., 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 Surf brand is able to attract 40 rupees premium per kilo for every product they sell. If I were to come to you and say, okay, I am willing to sort of mortgage the Surf brand as a collateral with you, do you think it's a good collateral? Is it a collateral? Yes, it's a collateral. Can you value it? Yes, you can value it because it has some pricing potential, right? Can you sell it? Yes, you can sell it to some other company who can tomorrow start manufacturing Surf Excel, and instead of getting 70 rupees can get 100 rupees, right? So can you value it? Yes. Is it a collateral? Yes. Can it generate a profit differentiation in your product? Maybe yes, right? Now, is it a good collateral for bank? Again, the criteria is very simple. The criteria of collateral is liquidity and nothing else. Can a bank liquidate it? Maybe. Yes, they can liquidate it. Can they liquidate it immediately? Yes. Can they get into a business of making surf and getting that profit themselves? No. So for the bank, it is simply a collateral and it's of no use. It is valuable to someone who is in the business of manufacturing surf, not to bank, right? A classic example is what you're seeing is, the Kingfisher logo, right? The Kingfisher airline had a logo. That logo is collateralized with SBI Bank. Kingfisher has defaulted. The logo is also collateral. Can they do anything with the logo? Nothing. Does it have a value? Yes, it has a value. They are unable to sell even the Kingfisher house. They have tried multiple times, with 200, 300 crore bid, and it is a prime location in Bombay. Nobody is willing to buy. So forget about logo. You can't even sell the property at whatever valuation you're looking at. Then what is the value of collateral? And majority of the errors at a bank level who are so fuzzy about giving a secured loan is in assessing the value and the nature of the collateral, right? They do sort of forced valuation or very, very high valuation, and based on the valuation, they calculate some loan to value ratio and eventually give a loan without realizing that the asset has nothing to do with what the actual value is, and they may not be able to realize it. And most of these banks are stuck with so many of these properties which are available, right? And that is the largest risk which these banks have. If you have any other asset, you can still sell it, but properties and even technology and rest of them, probably very difficult to sell. And that is very common across, Rajiv ji mentioned the, recovery rate of 30%. And I'll show you a chart on recovery rates in other countries. But that's what you will end up with, right? If it's a property which is more liquid, maybe you end up with 60, 70% recovery rate. Other than that, you sort of end up with 30, 40% recovery rate. So that's, the third C which we talk about, which is collateral from that perspective. And the last C which you have is essentially covenants. Now, what is covenants? Covenants is condition. Condition for what? Condition could be affirmative, condition could be negative. What is the condition about? It's about limitation. It's about the way the borrower conducts the business, right? So take a different example. If you tell me saying that, look, this is, in order to get the CPE of 1 hour or 2 hour on this session, you must attend the session from beginning to end, right? What is that? That's a condition. That's a covenant, right? That if you don't fulfill that covenant, you will not get the CPE credit, right? Similarly, from a banking perspective, they will say, okay, you have to open the bank account with us, or you have to do all transactions of sale purchase in our bank account so that we know what is happening, or you can't sell the property without letting us know, or you can't declare dividend without letting us know, or you can't pay that much salary, or you can't do this and that, and etc., right? So the bank or the lender imposes certain conditions, certain limitations on how the borrower behaves, not in terms of business, but in terms of unnecessary spending of that money and making a good use of that money and conducting its financial affairs in a prudent scenario, and that is what is covenant. Now you could have a negative covenant that you can't do capex, you can't do dividend, you can't do this, that, etc., You can have an affirmative covenant, which is maybe you will get your books audited, you will get your stock audit done, you will have a management in place, you will have a quarterly board meeting, you will comply with law, you will pay TDS on time, you will pay this, that, right? You will pay interest on time, like that. You can have a restrictive covenant, which is also, to some extent, mostly in financial world, that your debt to EBITDA has to be this, your interest coverage ratio has to be X, your so-and-so ratio has to be this, your working capital has to be this, your cash flow has to be this, any percentage or any combination of permutation combination you can define. Now, here is the trick. A most common financial, covenant across the world is DSCR, debt service coverage ratio, popularly known as interest coverage ratio, right? Now, you would be perplexed to know that in India, there are almost 20 definitions of how to calculate interest coverage ratio. You have a way given by CA Institute or your traditional accounting textbooks. You have a way used by CRISIL, you have a way used by S&P, you have a way used by Market, you have a way used by X Bank, you have a way used by Y Bank. But I was able to find out about 20 different definitions used by different agencies on what is interest coverage ratio, right? Now, if all these guys have a different definition to interest coverage ratio, how do you think they can assess the creditability of the person, or they can say whether the covenant is met or not, right? They can't, right? So that's the other problem with credit risk analysis, that there is no standardization available, right? Everybody is using their own definition of what they want to measure, what suits them, and that creates the whole problem in comparing apples to apples or apples to oranges. And what Rajiv ji mentioned about macro risk, this is what the macro risk is, right? Your idiosyncratic risk, which is more company specific, is a little bit different. You can still handle it. But when, a lot of garbage comes together, you don't know what's happening at each level, right? Everybody has inflated number, you don't know what is happening. And that is what creates a problem at the eventual end. So we looked at four sort of pillars of, credit analysis. Your character, which has to do with your reputation. Your capacity, which has to do with your ability. Your collateral, on what are you willing to give as a security. And then last is your covenant, which is an ongoing sort of monitoring with respect to what you're doing, what you're not doing, right? Now, despite that, now if you look at, like I mentioned, if you Google, you will get 5C, 6C models. People add cash as a fifth C. They will add, some other sort of parameter like cash flow or property or something else. As long as you can find a financial word which starts with C, you can add a model and create it like a 5C, 6C, 7C or something. Right? But fundamentally, these four are the fundamental principles which will define what credit risk you have and what credit risk you won't have. All right. Moving forward, this slide we have already covered. What are the typical ratios used in credit analysis? Now, I talked about profitability ratios, GP, which is gross profit, EBITDA, ROE, ROA, return on equity, return on assets, return on capital employed. You have activity ratios like sales turnover, purchase turnover, creditor turnover, debtor turnover, working capital ratio like quick and acid test and stuff like that. Within capitalization, different people calculate it different way. Some people calculate only long-term debt to total capital. Some people calculate total debt to total capital, and some people calculate net debt Net debt is total debt minus the cash available on the balance sheet, right? A coverage ratio, like I mentioned, EBITDA by interest is also a ratio, EBIT by interest is also a ratio, PAT by interest is also a ratio, FFO by interest is also a ratio, total debt by CFO, total debt by FFO, which is fund from operation, or free cash flow, etc., etc. Certain sectors like oil and gas or telephone, you will have specific ratio like debt divided by total reserves, or total debt divided by barrel, or something else, right? It could be debt per customer, it could be debt per car, it could be debt per kilometer, whatever sort of business you are in, that ratio could be customized to sort of understand the operational efficiency as well as the way in which the bank is operating. Now, here is what is the industry comparative ratio for US and EMEA market. EMEA is Europe, US, as all of you know, is US. So for a typical AAA rated company, the EBITDA margins are roughly around 29.6 or 30%, right? For a AA company, it's about 24. For a single A company, it's about 24. For a triple B company, it's about 22. And for a single B company, it's about 20. So as you see, the difference in profitability from a B rated, which is below investment grade, to AAA is only 10%, right? It's not a huge difference, right? You see the return on capital. For a AAA company, the return on capital is about 36, 37%. For a single B company, the return on capital is 8%. You see the coverage ratio. For a AAA company, it's about between 60, 65 times. For a single B company, it's about 1 or 2 times. You see debt by EBITDA. AAA companies have almost zero debt, which explains why they are AAA. And single B companies have almost 6 to 7 times of debt, right? There, the average debt is about 15% of equity. Here, the average debt is about 84% of equity. So this is like more levered than what it is, right? Now, this is an average of 3 financial years, right? Now, if you look at EBIT interest coverage ratio, right? More particularly the column 4, the fourth column on your chart, you see the AAA numbers is about 60.2. Then you see the AA number, which is about 16.8. And then you have single A number, which is about 22, right? So the AA company has a lower interest coverage ratio than a single A company. How is it possible, right? Higher the rating, higher the ratio, better the ratio. Lower the rating, lower the ratio, more worse the ratio. But in this case, the ratio is in the favor of A and not in the favor of AA. What is the possible reason for this? One possible reason for this is that this is an average of 3 years. If for one particular year, the companies which are in AA categories didn't perform well, then obviously the ratio will be lower. Second is, this is the average of 3 years dated 2011, right? And that's one of the reasons why I choose this slide. 2011 was after 2008, and 2008 was a very bad year for everyone, and hence you will see this, right? Now, what you notice in this is that there are a couple of ratios which are lower, but rest of the ratios are still very, very high, right? So when you look at rating agency, they don't look at your 1, 2, 3 year performance to upgrade or downgrade you. They look at a consistent trend before they do a justice to upgrade or downgrade. They obviously have a range saying that, look, within this range, the ratio should be there. If the range goes, then your score is down or score is up or vice versa, or etc., etc., right? I couldn't find a similar table for Indian corporates. And that is why I not put it here. But I'm sure it will be available in some time if you can compile the data from that perspective. Now, this is only for industrials, which means I've only looked at manufacturing and other sectors, not the financial services sector, which is typically your banks and insurance and those kind of stuff, right? So that part is not there here, right? So this is basically from a coverage perspective on what kind of ratios or what kind of average statistics you would expect in these kind of companies. This by no way it means that if you have these ratios, you will be able to achieve AAA rating in a CRISIL or a CARE or any other rating agency from that perspective. Now, I want to sort of throw some attention for you to on this slide. I want to read the first column, which is now the one which you saw the last slide is S&P data. The one you are seeing right now is Moody's data. Have a look at the first and the second column, and then we'll come back to discussion, and I'll drink some water in between. Now, if you look at Moody's, the EBITDA or the operating margin for a AAA company is 20%, or EBITDA margin is 23, whereas you look at S&P, the EBITDA margin is 29. You look at EBITDA interest expense, it is 21 for a AAA company. Here it is 68 or maybe 60 or that perspective. Why do you think there is a difference, right? I told you earlier that there are 21 different possible definitions of how do you calculate ratios. If you look at Moody's, they have calculated EBITDA, right? They have not included depreciation here, right? If you look at Moody's, they have included, EBITDA, which is, your depreciation is part of that, right? You look at, EBITDA by interest expense, which is again the depreciation not included. Here you have, EBIT or EBITDA, right? So some different measure is there from that perspective. So based on the definition change, the ratio change will be different, and hence you will never be able to reconcile the ratios which are calculated by rating agencies versus what you get from the financial statement. So what I'm trying to say is that the input of these rating agencies is very, very different, and hence, the rating criteria is very different, and hence you will see one rating agency has done it high rating, other is in low, and the actions are independent of each other from that perspective, right? The data is obviously of the similar period from that perspective, but you will see the difference from that angle. This is the other ratios for Moody's FinMetrics, where debt to EBITDA is 1 time, maybe FFO debt, capex by depreciation, revenue volatility. So they calculate a little bit more ratios than what S&P calculates or S&P presents publicly. But yeah, I mean, the ratios are very, very different, on what you see. Now, we have discussed the 4C, model of rating. Now, you looked at the capacity, and I told you about the industry and other factors. So what is the rating trying to do? Rating is trying to identify the risk factors, which is business, financial, industry. And it is trying to identify protective factors, which is the regulatory aspect of barriers to entry and those kind of stuff, right? So one is, will rating be able to identify these risk factors? Yes. Will they present it to you? Yes. Second most pertinent question. Is rating only based on past actions? Or is rating also sort of looking at projections, right? As they say in our mutual fund world, past performance is not a guarantee to future. But do you think rating is based on only past actions? Because your, most of your things which you look at, which is covenants or maybe collateral or maybe capacity, is based on past historical financial data. Or do you think rating also takes into care projection? Because if they take care of projections, then none of the companies should fail because projections should be accurate, right? And if they don't take projections, then what is the use of rating? Because you are doing prospective decision of lending to a guy based on some historical data. Right? 10 years ago, if you would have looked what is the distance from, Chandigarh to Manali, it would have given you the same answer which it gives you right now. But 10 years ago, if you ask someone what is the time it takes from Chandigarh to Manali, the answer would have been very, very different in terms of number of hours than what is there today with respect to, the conditions of the road, right? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to use, 5-year, 10-year-old data and going to project it for next 10 years to sort of determine whether the company will be able to pay or not. And that is where the fundamental mismatch is there in which how you use credit rating and how you don't, right? Do they take projections in account? To some extent, yes. But do they do projection themselves? No, they don't do projection themselves. Who gives them the projections? The projections are given to them by the Holy Grail, the management themselves. And do you think any management would give a bad projections for their own business? I don't think so. But that is sort of the fundamental loophole. Do they adjust projections and stuff like that? Maybe they adjust, but I'm not very sort of comfortable with taking numbers from management and doing some sort of analysis on that, because it's like garbage in, garbage out, right? You enter garbage and garbage is going to come out. You can't get something out of it. Third is what do ratings do? They do sensitivity analysis. What is sensitivity analysis? So if you're looking at a rating of a ONGC, and the oil price, crude oil price, is about $55 or $60 right now. What happens to the company if the crude price go to $120? What happens to the company if the crude price goes to $50 or $40? Can the company still survive? Can the company still repay its debt? Right? So you're trying to say, what if scenario? COVID was one of those cases which nobody has thought of, right? So there, obviously, the credit risk models failed, miserably failed. But idea of a rating is to sort of understand and do what if analysis. What if the sales are down by 20%? What if the cost is up by 20%? What if the key employees leave and the company still survive? That is what we are trying to see. We talked in the beginning about whether rating is an art or a science, right? And I told you that if it's a science, it is a business model, it's a static model. If it's an art, then obviously it's subjective. Out of the 4 C I told you, one of the C is character, right? Now, how do you define character? Nobody knows, right? You can only give some perspective to character, but beyond a point, it's very difficult for you to sort of know whether the character of a person is, 0 or a 1. And that is why the subjectiveness comes in rating. And that is why rating is an art and not a science. Because when it's art, people can end up doing qualitative errors. And the last thing is, the rating is a judgment on relative ability to service debt, right? So, for example, you can compare 2 students based on their marks, right? So this person got 50%, this person got 55%, and hence 55% guy is better, right? So you can compare rating only with respect to something else. You can't have a standalone rating, right? Standalone ratings are different, right? So for example, if you look at your refrigerator, there it says energy rating of 3-star, 4-star, or 5-star, right? That is the absolute rating, saying that if you're 3-star rated, you're supposed to sort of, work under these conditions, right? But rating is a relative ability that compared to some other entity, you are better off, and hence your relative ability to repay is higher, and hence your rating is higher. So standalone, there is no rating, right? So whom are you comparing it with? That is what matters from that perspective, right? So these are the factors of rating from that perspective. Now, I promise I'll show you one model for rating. If you look at the screen, this is the rating model for Reliance Industries, few years ago until they had Jio and other businesses. Now you see, in Moody's, they've got 4 factors. Factor 1, scale diversification. Factor 2, refinery profitability. Factor 3, flexibility. Factor 4, institutional support. And each of those have some value based on what the calculation is. And then there is a mapping. So if you look at the crude distillation capacity of 1.2 million barrels a day, if you compare similar refineries across the world, they are rated single A, and hence the rating is single A. If you look at the complexity barrels, which means can you process more dirty crude and still take out the same kind of oil, those kind of complex refineries are not there many in the world, and hence the rating is AAA. You look at factor 3, which is debt by complexity barrels. The debt per barrel, I told you about the customized ratio. Debt per barrel is $1,363, and that there the rating is about CAA, because a lot of these kind of companies don't have debt. So you see, each factor has been mapped to a rating, and then you have institutional support, and the indicated rating from the grid is A3, right? The A3 is a little bit higher than Baa2, and the actual rating assigned is Baa2. So the model told you the rating is A3, but you chose to assign them a lower rating, which is Baa2, and that to 2 notches below. Like after A3, Baa1 comes, and then comes Baa2. What do you think it could be the potential reason for that, right? And again, that is where the subjectivity of the company comes in. Now, I have shown you an example where the rating is actually lower, but you have seen current cases where ILFS and a lot of these guys have got a different rating than what the fundamentals suggested, or most of these NPAs essentially have the same issue, right? You try and put in numbers in a way that it satisfies your criteria and gives you a high rating, when the number actually are not in this thing. In banks, you are supposed to submit CMA data, right? The CMA data for next 5 years projections. Who makes this data? Does management even know that they can achieve that growth? Probably no. And banks use that to assess whether you are credit worthy for next 5 years, and that is where the pitfall is. Now, in this case, the rating is lower than the actual rating, one because of the subjective element or because of other parameters. But the major reason here is because of the country rating. India as a country, as a sovereign country, is Baa3, right? And no company in a country can be higher rated than a country, right? So if you were to choose between Government of India debt or Reliance debt, which debt is more secure? Government of India debt is more secure, right? And hence, obviously, the rating is always higher for a country. There are only very few instances, maybe 3 or 4 in India, which have got a rating higher than the country, because majority of their revenues come from exports or otherwise, right? And that is why the rating difference is there. But this is, the classic example. You can change the weightages, you can sort of map it, you can create your own rating model, etc., etc. I told you about peer group and relative ability. So RIL, which is Reliance, is compared with Indian Oil of India, Thai Oil of Thailand, PTT for again Thailand, SOL for Korea, Valero for US, etc., etc. And each of those guys and numbers are given here. Similarly, you can do some sort of peer group analysis and try and see where the rating, goes in. Now, most of you, there's one single alphabet which everybody likes, right? Whether it is financial, non-financial, student, professional work, or otherwise. And what is that letter? That letter is essentially A, right? Investors love the word A, and that is why the ratings also start with AAA. So we like AAA rating. We like the A row in the theaters. Some of you may like A-rated movies. You like to get A grade in your marks. You like to get A rating in your performance. You like to live in A cities. You obviously want Apple, and you want to obviously look at the powerful country, America, etc., etc. But the magical letter A obviously has some psychological perspective from there. So these are obviously the global rating agencies, local rating agencies. You anyway know most of them have some affiliation with local rating agencies in India, and we go from there. These are the sort of the categories. So AAA is obviously the common, but then Moody's starts with AA1 and go to 1, 2, 3. S&P and Fitch has AA plus and AA and AA minus. So the upper category, which is still Baa3, is called investment grade, and the below category, which is below Baa3, is non-investment grade or junk or high yield or high risk category. And D is obviously default category, which obviously companies move when they default on the loan. India is currently at Baa3, which is a long-term investment grade rating from all the rating agencies. I don't know how much time do we have, Rahulji. If we have time, we can continue. Otherwise, we can jump on to questions and answers. I'm sure.
No, we have time, sir. We can continue with your session, sir.
Sure. So I have a few more slides which I want to cover, and then I think we will leave some time for questions. So, can ratings be requested from issuers, or are they requested from issuers, or can you do unsolicited rating? Right. So largely, ratings will be done when you give a request to rating agency, right? But can you have unsolicited rating? Like, can the rating agency rate you on their own? Yes. Can someone stop them? No, right? They can rate you based on public data, right? Now, it is used by some rating agency for marketing. So, for example, if there's a new rating agency in town and they come to you saying that, sir, we want to rate you, and you say, okay, which other companies you have rated, and you have none, they are likely to sort of not give you business. Right? But if you say, sir, we have rated Nifty 50 companies, we have rated the Reliance, we have rated the Tata, we have rated XYZ, even though it is unsolicited rating, you will sort of have some goodwill. The other way this is used is, in terms of blackmailing, right? So if you go to a rating agency and, you go to all three rating agencies and you say, okay, finally you end up deciding that you will take rating from one agency, right? The other two might come to you saying that, look, if you don't take rating from us, we are going to give you a lower rating and then, spoil your chances of raising capital from the market. So it can be used vice versa also. Obviously, there are some checks and balances by regulator there, but largely, you can have solicited rating or unsolicited rating. You have a team of analysts which evaluate, you have an independent rating committee, and then whatever rating you give has to be accepted by the management. Now, if you give a rating of AAA to a management and they accept it, then the rating is published. If the management doesn't accept it, then it is not published, right? So management obviously comes to know the rating beforehand, and then they can decide whether they want to choose this rating or that rating and go from there. And in India, you will see a host of examples where, one company has done only long-term rating, other company has done only short-term rating. Why? Because we call this concept as rating shopping. You will go to an agency and ask for a particular rating based on what they give. Then again, there is a periodical review, and then there's the credit watch and surveillance, which is there, which in India is based on financials. So usually it happens annually, at least once a year is minimum. But you can do sort of more or less from that perspective. This is the standard sort of process I've taken from CARE website. The details of the process and the fees, etc., are clearly mentioned on each rating website, and so is the rating methodology. So if you go to each rating website, you will find the methodology available for these companies for different sectors. And you as an individual, before presenting your case to a bank, can decide what criteria they are going to look at from that perspective. This is the standard fees. I'm sure it has changed, but classic fees from that perspective. So towards the end. Rating is the input to decision making. It is not a recommendation, right? They are not saying that the AAA company is, a zero risk company. It is saying that the AAA company has low risk compared to a AA company. It doesn't mean that it has zero risk, right? Just because you bought a life insurance policy doesn't mean you will not die. It is just a risk mitigant, right? Similarly, rating is just one of the inputs to decision making. You may still decide not to give a loan or have other criteria to safeguard yourself. The problem happens with banks is most of these banking, professionals who join banks join as a PO, right? A probationary officer. And as they move through ranks and time, they eventually come to a credit department, which is most the sought after department in banks. And because they are generalists, they don't understand financial statements, Ind AS or credit ratings. And hence they rely on a third party agency like credit rating, which has their own limitations. And instead of considering this as an input to decision making, they treat it as a recommendation, and then the whole thing defaults. And then on top of that, we have a herd mentality. When one of the top banks is giving loan, everybody will join as a syndicate, relying on that bank, and that bank has their own risk appetite, and you don't have that risk appetite, and vice versa. Rating is only for debt, not for equity, right? Only loans and bonds can get rated, not equity. Equity shares doesn't have a rating. Now, rating can also be for individuals. In individual sense, you have something known as a CIBIL score. In India, obviously, there are 4 agencies which do that: CIBIL, Equifax, iMark, and there's Experian. And you can get your credit score free of cost, I think 4 times a year from these agencies. If somebody has taken loan on your behalf or defrauded on your documents, or if you have been denying credit, or if your credit score is low, that will be available in a CIBIL score. So if you have not checked your CIBIL score, I would urge you to go and check at least your CIBIL score to know whether there is something fishy out there which you don't even know. Higher rating means low risk, but not zero risk, right? It still has some risk. And you've seen companies go from AAA to D category in no point in time, about 2 years ago. It is prospective. Yes, they include some sort of projections. It is interactive, qualitative, quantitative, and it has its own limitations, which obviously, if you understand better, then it will be easier and faster for you to sort of take decision. And it is always and always the relative assessment. It is not to be looked at on a standalone basis. Just because the company is AAA doesn't mean anything, right? You have to look at it from an entirety, from a sector perspective, right? If the entire vegetable is spoiled, you can't choose the less spoiled one out of that. You will have to go for a fresh lot of vegetable. So those are the few sort of food for thoughts for all of you. With this, I think I conclude my formal remarks, and I hand it back to Rahul for further comments.
Thank you for your valuable presentation, sir. So basically, to conclude, you have told about the 4 C's that you have told about: character, capacity, then the collateral and the covenants. So तो उसका सर आप अपना सेम ही पार्ट है जो what Rajesh sir was saying about the financial and the non-financial part. So regarding the credit rating, जो lastly जो आपने कहा credit rating के बारे में, if you will see various like DHFL, ILFS and various other companies, just before the issue in these companies came, they were AAA companies, and on just the another day they were treated as a junk company. The credit rating was clearly transferred from AAA to D category. So a huge amount of money of public was also involved in this case. That's why in today's scenario it is important for us to work in field of artificial intelligence so that we can work in that way. जैसे आपने you gave an example of Kingfisher logo, जिसमें हमने valuation का कहा था, that was a collateral. If you, since I am into forensic audit, so if you see the valuation of Kingfisher logo was done by 2 agencies having a huge variation. You must be knowing about that. So Rajesh sir also pointed out the fact the valuations. There was huge variations. There are misrepresentations while doing the valuations as well, because of which the banks also made a mistake while taking the higher valuation while giving their loans as a collateral. So valuations no doubt plays a very important role, but along with that there are financial and non-financial parts which are both to be seen. Had the banks or companies seen the non-financial parts, DHFL, they would have been able to assess the risk in these companies. So one of the risks that I will tell you in ILFS was short-term funds were being utilized for long-term purposes. Like commercial paper balances were being utilized for providing long-term loans. That's why they were not able to honor their commercial papers. So this is a very credit risk management is a very important role in today's scenario, which you have sir very well taken. So now at the end we have just 5 minutes. So मैं अनिल कक्कड़ जी हैं सर, हमारे वाइस चेयरमैन है चंडीगढ़ ब्रांच के. First of all, I like to thank उपकार सिंह सर, वो पूरे सेशन में सर हमारे साथ रहे. He attended, he is chairman of NIRC branch. राजीव सिंह सर भी थे, वो भी by chance है नहीं अभी. He was also there for around 70 to 80% of our session. तो अब मैं अनिल कक्कड़ सर को सर इनवाइट करूंगा for his closing remarks to give his insight into credit risk management and how to go forward in this scenario, sir.
Thank you, Rahulji. Thanks a lot. Thank you, sir. Good evening to each and everyone, respected members. It is matter of great privilege for me to propose a formal vote of thanks for today's webinar. I, on the behalf of the Committee of Management Accounting of ICI and on the behalf of Chandigarh branch of ICI, would like to thank CA Bihari Lalji, keynote speaker. So no need to say, it was wonderful session and very detailed, informative deliberation on your part, sir. And मेरे लिए भी it was very new subject. I generally heard on this Bihari Lalji, and from last 1 hour I was there on your listening your deliberation, sir, and learned a lot of things. So I hope that all the participants have gained a lot of knowledge from your deliberation, sir. So once again, I am thankful to you, sir, on my behalf and on the behalf of Chandigarh branch, sir. We are sincere. We are also thankful to CA Rajiv Singh ji for his remarkable presence and addressing the learned viewers ji. Our sincere thanks to CA Charanjot Nanda ji, Chairman, and CA Nand Kishore Hegde ji, Vice Chairman, Committee on Management Accounting, for giving our branch the opportunity to host such an important event. And in the end, I am thankful to all the senior and other members for their participation. And once again, thanks each and everyone. Bye-bye. Stay correct, stay safe, stay connected, stay updated. That is from my side, Rahulji. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, उपकार sir, I will request कि भी सर आप 2-3 मिनट के लिए अपने closing remarks सर दें सर about this risk management, sir, about the session taken by Deora sir and Rajiv Singh sir.
सर बेसिकली मेरा टॉपिक नहीं है. आई कैन से जस्ट थैंक्स टू बिहारी लाल जी.
Really, sir, it is new topic for us, Rahulji. But
Yes, it's a new topic for us.
learned a lot. That is
एक्चुअली चंडीगढ़ जिस तरह से सिटी है सर, वहाँ पे इस तरह से कोई भी प्रैक्टिस नहीं है सर. इट्स इन डेली यू कैन सी.
यही तो अपॉर्चुनिटी है सर, यही अपॉर्चुनिटी है आप लोग.
But sir, it is Bihari ji, मैं interrupt कर रहा हूँ sir को. I am just interrupting chairman sir. Sorry sir. But it was Bihari ji very informative. The 4C factor rating is there, and Rahul ji is absolutely said that is by going through this artificial intelligence, we can make so many informative information from the company's biodata, sir. And I have learned a lot, sir. Lot. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks.
Please mine. I am honored.
थैंक यू सो मच सर. थैंक यू सर.
Go to Rahul ji.
With this we'll sir, with this we'll close the session, sir. Thank you, Deora sir. Thank you, Upkar Singh sir. Thank you, Anil sir, and all the dignitaries present in the virtual seminar. Nanda sir, Rajiv Singh sir. So, sir, thanks a lot. Okay, and have a good day, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day. Okay.